All right. I am here with Andrea James. She was a former stock analyst, senior vice president, and senior research analyst for Dougherty Company from 2010 to 2016. And we have a special opportunity to interview her through this Google Hangout. I'm excited because Andrea was known as like one of the, I would say, most lucid Tesla analysts out there. Yeah, I'm a member of the Tesla Motors Club investor section, and we've got a bunch, hundreds and hundreds of retail investors, some who have multi-million-dollar positions in Tesla from, back in 2011, 2012.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
yeah, and we always talk about who are the good analysts and who are the ones who are kind of a bit shaky. And Andrea always comes up as one of the top Tesla analysts, just because we feel you've been one of those who've done your research, who actually went ahead and answered kind of the simple questions, and all of your questions on analyst calls were always more the deep type of forward-looking questions, and we always appreciated that. And so I wanted an opportunity to talk with you, especially since you've left being an analyst and now you're doing another venture, and now you're hopefully more free to talk about I guess your life as a Tesla analyst.
Now I own the stock. So.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah.
Yay! I get to finally own it. So.
Yeah, I heard on your blog post you're looking forward to actually buying Tesla.
Yeah, I own it at 201. So.
Nice, good move. So I guess first question is, what brought you into kind of the analyst world? Why did you make a choice to go into that?
Yeah, so I was actually an investigative business journalist before becoming a stock analyst, diving deep into companies, but for articles in the newspaper. And I actually got headhunted by my firm. They found my LinkedIn profile, and I had written some articles that the companies that are based out here in Seattle, where I live, Boeing, Starbucks, Microsoft, that caught some attention. And so they said, why don't you come and we'll teach you how to do a financial model. And I had majored in comp sci, I minored in physics, so I wasn't really afraid of the math aspect of it. But we can't teach sort of the curiosity and the wanting to learn. So I migrated over right after the Great Recession, it was August 2009. And obviously didn't cover Tesla at the time, they weren't public, but that's what I did. And my firm was based in Minneapolis, and I got all my licenses over the course of the next year.
Okay, good. And so what were your initial companies that you covered, or were you just kind of like being trained the first year?
So this is how I came to cover Tesla is a great story, actually. And it's a great story that also involves I used to work, the vice president of investor relations at Tesla is Jeff Evanson. He used to work for my firm, and I worked with him. So he loved the company so much, he went to go work for them, which is kind of an interesting tidbit there. And what happened was we were covering defense and intelligence and geospatial companies. And I remember it was the month of April 2010. And a company we covered called AeroVironment was going into electric vehicle charging. So they primarily made drones, but they were going into electric vehicle charging. And so I took that month to kind of just study the electric vehicle market. I got to know, I think his name was Mark Perry over at Nissan. Nissan was coming out with the Leaf. We got to figure out what was going on with the Chevy Bolt. And kind of came out a little bit negative on the electric vehicle market. Took a deep dive into everything from what does it do to our grid to what's the demand for these vehicles, analyzed, Prius sales back in the day. So then when Tesla IPO'd, it kind of became a natural progression for us to pick up coverage of Tesla. And we were initially negatively biased. Just right off the bat, what is this thing? We'll have a lot of fun kind of taking the piss out of it. And, we were negatively biased until we started doing our research.
Okay, so was it you and part of a team, I'm guessing, that's doing this research?
Yeah, so there was two of us, and we came out in, I think it was September 2010. We were the only Wall Street firm with a buy on Tesla. And there was several things that really kind of, when you kicked the tires, we started to realize, wow, this company really has something. I remember calling Daimler in Germany in 2010, doing our due diligence and asking them, I got a representative on the phone and I said, look, you guys were one of the first to take an equity investment in Tesla, why? And Daimler said, well, they have technology that nobody else has. And Daimler's like some of the best vehicle engineers on the planet. And here's Daimler in 2010, Tesla just IPO'd, telling me that Tesla has technology that nobody else has. You really have to, getting to know Elon and the team really helped a lot. In the early days, we had like full access. So Jeff actually left our firm in December of 2010 to go do IR for Tesla. And in January 2011, I inherited the entire universe as the senior analyst.
Okay. Wow. So Jeff was part of your team, I guessing, at Dougherty.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And that
that's
research
amazing.
report, and that research report that we wrote was, we've gone back and read it. And pretty much everything we kind of thought was going to come true has come true, but it wasn't us. It was looking at what Elon said he was going to do and then checking out everything. Okay, is this possible? Is this right? Can he do this? And as we did the research, we're like, remember starting with a negative bias and then going, oh, whoa, no, this is going to happen. And that was a really fun process of discovery. And that was a multi-year process. Go ahead.
So for your early research, did you guys talk with Roadster owners at all?
Yes, but the funny thing about but the funny thing about that is the early Tesla fans were a bit skeptical because the Roadster was so late to come to market.
Sure.
So the people who had the car loved it. I rode in a Roadster in 2010 multiple times. But there was also some early fans who were like, Tesla can't bring a car to market on time because the Roadster was late. So that was kind of so you take that into account, but it's a different company today.
Sure. So how did you get to know Elon and his team early on?
So early on, remember when the stock was like at $19 a share, right? They were courting Wall Street. So I remember bringing an investor group through. I believe we were the first, our firm had the first Wall Street investor tour of the factory, which was an empty room. It was really neat. But basically we had the head of manufacturing, Gilbert, walking us through and telling us, here's where we're going to get the robots. Peter Rawlinson was the chief engineer. We got to sit down with him. Our investors, and these were my clients and myself, got an hour with JD Straubel, the chief technology officer. George Blankenship walked us through the store on Santana Row and kind of walked us through everything about the store concept. So in early days, and plus we had the meeting with the CFO. So in early days, it was a lot easier to get access to the entire team. Obviously, as time wore on, mostly now Jeff Evanson handles investor relations, and he is so knowledgeable that you can pretty much go to him with any question you have. And if he doesn't have the answer, he would go find it out, but he usually has the answer. And so he's very investor facing. But in early days, the company was a lot more open. You could take pictures. I took all kinds of pictures of the factory. Now you're not allowed to take pictures, obviously, stuff like that.
Got it. Interesting. Wow. So I'm guessing, so did those early days of, I guess, spending a lot of time with the management and tours and all this, and also I'm guessing, did that help you later on kind of always have a foundation of kind of understanding what Tesla's all about?
Yeah, what it did is it gave me the confidence to stand up to people who were sort of smart and said, Tesla can't do this. And I remember, I'll tell you a story. So I went to an electric vehicle conference in Washington, D.C. in spring of 2011. And I kind of sat midway toward the front of the room, and there was a bunch of battery experts up at the front, including LG Chem. All the big names were there. Tesla was not there. And at that time I believe I was covering A123. I can't remember the date I picked up coverage, but I was researching A123, which I would eventually pick up. And A123's cost per kilowatt hour were like at $1,000. They were selling to Fisker for $700, so selling at a gross loss, right? And all of the cost per kilowatt hour that everybody was citing was like $700 or higher, and I think Tesla was around $500. And so I remember, putting my hand up, and nobody knew I was an analyst. I was just some random lady in the audience. And I put my hand up and I said, you know, why is Tesla at the price it's at today and nobody else is there? You know, and the hostility I got from the panel was really surprising to me. And later on, I went up to several of the panel members and I just said, let's just have a conversation about Tesla, because I was trying to truth check it, right? Tesla says they can do this. I'm not going to just take them at their word. I'm going to talk to all these battery experts. And I remember this guy said, he's like, yeah, we don't, I mean, like this look on his face, he's like, we don't actually believe that Tesla can do what they say they can do. We, you know, I'm like, so they're lying. Yes, we think they're lying. And so you got to this point where you're like, wow, this company's either lying or they really have something.
Sure.
And I didn't think they were lying. And so when you asked me how it informed me later on, so later on, as naysayers would come up, it wasn't hard for me to say, okay, just because you work at a university or you say you're an expert, the world's expert in battery technology is J.B. Straubel, the CTO of Tesla, period. He's the expert in the world, and he's not a liar. And it gave me the confidence to kind of push back when people were just very doubtful of what Tesla said it could do.
Sure. Okay. So interesting.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting stuff. Yeah. By the way, yeah, Jeff has been totally responsive to me and a bunch of other investors who contact him. So JB, why would you call him the world's the world's expert on batteries? I mean, I've actually had a conversation with him at one of the Tesla events, and he's like fascinating. He's like totally passionate with batteries.
But a geek who's down to earth, right? Like
exactly. So what convinced you that he is the world's expert on batteries?
Well, if you think about it, Tesla's the largest buyer of lithium-ion batteries in the world, right? And so they procure more lithium-ion batteries than anybody else. And even at the time of the IPO in 2010, this fact was true, which was that Tesla had the largest lithium-ion battery database in the world for automotive use. Of course, now they're migrating for other uses, but in terms of the problem of energy storage, Tesla solved it. And that's what an electric car does, is it solves the problem of energy storage. And so if you are an expert on batteries, you would probably apply to Tesla. I think their acceptance rate for new hires is lower than the acceptance rate of Stanford. So they recruit great talent. And I always say buying the stock is the ability to buy a company that has the ability to acquire the best talent. And it's also it's a culture of iterative learning, right? Like Tesla is better today than it was 5 years ago. And meanwhile, the rest of the industry is trying to catch up and figure out what Tesla knows. But I mean, Tesla just has this amazing head start. And then you look at what's going on with the Gigafactory, and Tesla has its pick of battery suppliers. Obviously, Panasonic's the largest, and they're working with them. So I mean, it started out with just being really innovative and researching this, and now it's gotten to the point where they have scale on their side as well.
I mean, it's fascinating because I actually completely agree. I think Tesla's a secret kind of core competency is batteries, and going forward too. It's what gives them, such a cost advantage, over anyone else.
Well, and I remember, so when in the early days when we used to tour the factory, you weren't allowed up on the second floor. And that was like the secret second floor. Like I think there were showers up there, and if you biked to work and you wanted to use those showers, you needed a special key card to get into the second floor, and that's where all the trade secret was, right? It's because Tesla made all its patents public, right? But there's so much that's trade secret. So I was one of the first who was allowed up onto that second floor, and I wasn't allowed to take pictures, but I got to just go tour it and just go see the floor and see the machines that they had to build. Elon talks about the machine that builds the machine. I mean, like, you look at these parts and they're like, you couldn't procure this part. We had to make this part. My research took me talking to Fanuc. Fanuc is their robot supplier. And so I've talked to a lot of the Tesla suppliers as well over the course of my research. And what you realize is Tesla is like dragging their suppliers, kicking and screaming into the current century, right? Like you talk to Fanuc and they're like, it is a headache and a privilege to be on the Tesla account. You say, why? Oh, well, Tesla breaks more robots than any other company. Like Tesla will get the robot, send it back broken, and the Tesla engineers will have written like, here's what you need to do so your robot can fit our use, right? You just love it. So I remember writing to JB the first time I was up on that floor, and I think it was like 2012, maybe 13. Sorry, it all kind of runs together. But I remember writing to JB privately and just saying, "Oh my gosh, JB, like I have to confess." Tears came to my eyes when I was on the second floor. Like, I can't believe what you guys are doing. It's amazing. And JB wrote back and he's like, "Yeah, I don't think people realize what's going on here." So yeah.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. So, okay, going back to 2010 to 2012, I guess some people don't remember the timeline, but they went IPO, I think 2010, and then summer 2012 is when they first came out with the Model S. So before that time, how were you doing your due diligence? Were you kind of like going to the factory? Were you kind of checking to see if they're actually making milestones, if they actually have a real product or not?
Thanks for asking this. So we want to hear something funny.
Yeah.
So the thing about an analyst is you're helping investors to make decisions. And I've always had a buy on Tesla, but there's always been periods where I'm like, they're going to miss the quarter. I'd write a note and say, or the stock's going to take a breather. So I think the stock is generally up, but there's always going to be periods where it's going to go down and go back up, right? That is the stock market,
Sure.
right? So I came up with this matrix, and it was this, and I have it right here. I can pull it up. All of the milestones for Model S, and I joined the Society of Automotive Engineers. So I became a member, and I'm like, here's how you make a car. And so I had all these things. And what I was going to do is I was going to track all the milestones for Model S. And as soon as they were like a week late, we were going to put out a note. Because in the beginning, my writing was very prolific. I wrote about everything. Well, the truth is that on the walk to Model S, they were ahead of time on every milestone. And I actually remember being in the factory in April 2011, and what I realized was their communication to the street was 3 months. They gave themselves 3 months of cushion. So they were like internally, they were going to have it done by a certain date, and then there would be 30 days to 3 months of cushion for when they told the street it was going to be done. Now they've stopped. On the last conference call I was on, I asked Elon, what's the status of body line 2? And he's like, we're getting too much into the internal decisions of Tesla. It's like, but in the beginning, we had access to all that. They would tell you, this is what's happening with the lines. And so the point is walking up to Model S, they hit almost all their milestones. And I think Model S came to market a few weeks earlier, something like that.
Got it. Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. Huh. So, so what's your take on Model X and Model 3? Meaning, why was the Model X first delayed? So I guess, initially they didn't need it because Model S, sales were much higher than expected. But when they wanted to put it out, they weren't able to put it out on time or in very limited quantities. And they had a lot of quality issues, production issues. And then compare that to, I guess, Model 3. And so the question then is, are they going to have more problems, delays, production issues in Model 3? Or do you see Tesla as actually Elon is basically saying, oh, we've learned our lesson, we're making it designed for manufacturing, making it simple. What's your whole take on Model X and Model 3?
Yeah. So the Model S was on time. We just went over that, a little bit ahead of schedule. They knew they had to get it right. I think companies, and especially for publicly traded companies, and please, God, maybe it's from Tesla's watching this, don't take this the wrong way, but I think companies will do what they can get away with, right? So, for example, with the Model X, they didn't need it. Elon's perfectionism and they're so perfectionist, and I think at one point they just scrapped all the designs and they were like, we just need to start over, and they lost a year's worth of work, and they kind of got set back for a year on that, and that's because they wanted to have part commonality with the Model S, meaning that you could have both of them coming down the same line, two different types of cars, because it's the Model S is a platform, right? So you had the Roadster, which was the two-seat sports car platform, which is gone but will come back. And then you have the Model S platform, the X and the S are both on that platform. And then the Model 3 is another platform, and then the truck and all that will be on that platform. And so you can save manufacturing space. You don't have to have separate lines. And I think they had gotten too far away from that with the Model X that there was not enough part commonality. And so they had to kind of start over. And also the other thing is with the Model X is they promised it. I remember the big rollout was it was February of 2012 before the S even came out. And I think it was because Tesla was wanting to show momentum. We've got the S, but then the X is going to come out. But when the S came out, it was such a smashing success, right? It got Car of the Year, got all these awards. Now it's the top selling car in its category in North America. Go Tesla. So that's what I think happened with the X. With the 3, it's a complete, so you have to look at, and this is the thing that I would always get asked this on television, and there was never enough time, so thank you for giving me the time. The Model 3, it's a different scenario. It's not like, oh, this company's brought 2 cars to market and one was late, and therefore there's a 50-50 chance the next one will be late because they can't bring cars to market on time. I mean, real analysis means looking at the actual issues that made the Model X late. Most of those are not transferable to Model 3. But you could say, if the Model 3 sedan comes out, is the truck gonna be late or behind schedule? And one thing we've learned about Tesla is that they're not the best at predicting, like they cited their own hubris in one of their press releases. So it's a long way of saying I don't know.
Got it.
But you see what I'm saying? You see how the analysis kind of goes down, you go down into, and you can look at the milestones, and I can pull them up on my spreadsheet here of what you have to do to bring a car to market. But I mean, and then the other thing is the supplier issue. And this is the other, black swan. You never know, right? Elon says they're only as fast as their least capable, slowest supplier.
Sure.
So.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, I think you might have asked this once or twice in an earnings call, but it seems like Elon has definitely a huge load on his shoulders, and Tesla is very much CEO-driven company. But in your opinion, like, why hasn't Tesla hired a COO?
Gosh, it's not something I got asked a lot as an analyst. When you ask that question, what role is not being filled do you think that the COO needs to fill? And don't get me wrong, a lot of companies have COOs, not all of them do. But what role do you think could be better filled if a COO were to come into place?
Well, I think what myself, and not just myself, I guess different people have different opinions, but to give like a general sense of what people have been saying in general, I guess it's this kind of like this, there's been kind of a series of misguidance, where I won't say every quarter, but it almost seems like most quarters now, 3 out of 4 quarters, it seems like Tesla will say we can do this, but then they miss it, right? And it seems like one of the issues is, and it might not be the core issue, but it seems like one of the issues is Elon is extremely busy with, design work, with putting out fires, with Tesla, but also he has, a whole nother SpaceX company. And it seems like, Elon's like core, kind of giftings or competencies are, the long-term vision, strategic thinking, kind of designed to kind of like make sure that this is a killer product. But it doesn't seem like, at least it doesn't appear that day-to-day operations, like kind of
you're seeing
like 100 things at once, is his core competency. And I guess the question is that kind of, contributing to maybe Tesla's type of, misguidance, or is it maybe a completely different issue?
Yeah, no, it's issues of execution. Yeah. So, I mean, Elon is an operations guy. I mean, in order to be a good executor, you have to be able to ask the right questions to know how the business works, right? So somebody, a chief operations officer who looks at execution, or do they have an execution problem, or do they have a communication problem, really? I mean, I don't think Tesla has an execution problem, just on the balance of the last 5 years. But quarter to quarter, you're right, they don't hit their delivery targets. They generally usually have a good excuse,
Sure.
But for the stuff that's not, I mean, Wall Street loves, I mean, this is the thing about Wall Street. Wall Street doesn't like uncertainty, and they don't really like risk. And when you're starting something completely new, it's all uncertainty and risk. That's what you're dealing with. Now there's competence and there's IP and there's all that, but I mean, so I don't think, you're right that there's better ways to communicate around their delivery figures and their specific issues. Every time there's an issue, it seems to me like it's something else. You know, there was sales delivery, there's specific things at the factory. And so I don't know if, and I think too, the other thing is I actually haven't talked to them in a few months. You know, are they looking for an operations guy? I don't know. And does having a key person in place, is that the linchpin that makes it all work? Or is it just superfluous to just make Wall Street happy because it makes it look like they're doing something? You know, I don't know. And honestly, I don't know.
Sure, got it. So I wanted to go back to actually 2012, 2013. So Tesla releases the Model S. It you know, wins the Motor Trend Car of the Year. Were you able to test drive the car back then at all?
Yeah, I actually, my daughter, I was pregnant with my daughter and she was due to be born in over a week. And I went for a test drive in Model S and my husband drove it because my belly was so big and he gunned it onto the highway and he did like 20 to 80 and so fast. And I felt this, and I said, honey, why are pregnant women not supposed to go on roller coaster rides? And I went into early labor that night.
Oh my gosh. Whoa.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it was okay because she came a week early, which is fine. But isn't that funny? So
that's
it was
like
a week.
Headline, Model S causes early labor in Tesla Analyst. Wow.
But I'm gonna have a framed picture of a Model S in her room. So anyway.
Wow.
So anyway, it was a kind of funny. So yes, I was able to test drive the car.
Did that help you at all? Kind of like say, oh wow, this is actually a real car, you know, or it's a nice car.
So, you know, the truth is, this is the hilarious thing about me being a Tesla. I'm not really a car person.
Got it.
Like I'm a technology person, but like, so no. And as a matter of fact, my clients who are all very wealthy, mostly men, would ask me like, how does this compare to your car? Oh, I drive an old Ford. Like I'm really kind of practical. I'm a pedestrian. I take Uber. I fly everywhere. My lifestyle as an analyst was flying 2 to 3 times a month, taking Uber. And then when I was home in my Seattle neighborhood, I walk everywhere. So I'm not like a car person, which is really funny. Yeah, so thanks for asking about my personal opinion. So what I would do to make up for that weakness as an analyst is I would pay attention to the opinions of car people. And as a matter of fact, I had a client who was short Tesla, and when he was just arguing with me, and he's going into like details that were just beyond my capability, right? Like, and I can go with what I analyze and try to show my cred, but it was not like, you know, because it's not a race car and it's not meant to go around a racetrack. And some people have problems with the torque at higher speeds. And so, but I understand those concepts, but like, I don't care. And so I said, look, just come with me to the store and ask these questions of the Tesla sales guy, you know, because they know all the stuff. And I just want to observe that conversation as an analyst. And so we did. And then he took them in a test drive of a Roadster. It was before the Model S came, you know, there was enough of them to test drive. And he came back, and this guy was such a skeptic. He hated Elon, he hated Tesla. And he came back, and he had the biggest smile on his face. He covered his short. You know, I don't know if he went long, but
that's funny. Oh my gosh. So was late 2012, the stock is like not, you know, it's still around $30. Tesla Model S gets Car of the Year by Motor Trend. It enters, you know, early 2013. The stock is still stuck $35. Are you kind of like at this point saying like, what's going on? Like, shouldn't the stock be going up higher because the car is so good? Or what's your kind of like take from this period?
So I had like an internal model, like a DCF that basically had an $80 price target back when my price target was published at 40. So I always made sure that like I could get to higher valuations. And I always said back when my price target was like, I think at one point it was like $30 and $40. I always would say to clients on the phone, you know, this is a stepping stone on the path to a much bigger company, a much higher stock. The amount of time it would take to get to that price target, it was kind of like a 5-year view. I was actually pleasantly surprised by the 2013 run. I mean, it happened way faster than I thought it would. And so when the stock kind of reached 100, that's when I went on the TV and I was like, oh, it's going to be 200. And everyone's like, you're crazy and stupid. And I'm like, well, no. And so there was that. So that was 2013, but I'll say no. So the fact that it was kind of just hanging out, I mean, the volumes were so low in early 13. I mean, they were yet to reach 20,000 units. I mean, it was kind of like, you know, I kind of came up with, and if it makes sense, let me know if it makes sense for us to go through this, but I came up with a 4-pronged approach to the analysis, and we can go through that. And all of my analysis kind of fit into those 4 prongs. And as long as things were humming along those 4 prongs, I was pretty confident in the fact that the stock would eventually perform. But early on in the year, no. And I wasn't really tempted to downgrade it. A little bit, I was tempted to downgrade it once, and it was late 2012. They were going to be late, and they weren't going to make their, I think they were supposed to do 5,000 units. I need to go back and check, but they weren't going to make it. And I was like, oh, they're going to miss a key number. I should downgrade. And then I just I would go, whoa, this company is changing human behavior. It is advancing humanity forward, getting us off fossil fuels, like not crazy. Like this is what they're doing. If I am not going to be the analyst who gets caught up in they missed a quarter, because that is not, I will tell the Wall Street that I expect them to miss the quarter, but that's then use that as an entry point to buy the stock, not downgrade the stock. This company's shit, or am I allowed to curse on this? I'm sorry.
Whatever.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
So
sorry.
so stock, goes. I think it goes from basically 35-ish. It shoots in May 2013 to like after the earnings. It shoots up to 90, hangs out a little bit, goes up to I think July or so. It was up to 130. And then it did go back down a bit, and then it shoots up to like 190 or so. Like from 35 to 190. Like, what are you thinking here?
I wish I owned it.
Really?
Yeah, wow. I wish I owned it. I mean, so I think I got on Bloomberg at one point, and I said, nothing's changed at the company. What's changed is how quickly people are getting it, because it's that whole thing. What can go wrong? What can go wrong? What can go wrong? And then all of a sudden they go, what can go right? And when you start asking what can go right, then you get to these models, you're like, oh, this could be $1,000 stock. Like, you know what I mean? So yes, you have to execute, but this is the other thing about the bearish argument. So the bear argument is, yeah, but they have to execute. And my counter argument was always, well, show me a company that doesn't have to execute. That is true of every company on the planet. So just saying, oh yeah, but they have to execute, that's not really a good counter argument to why they can't get to point B, from point A to point B. So let's say point B is a $2,000 stock.
Sure.
And so how do they get there? Can they do it? And that's where my analysis, I kind of went deep on these 4 points. And
while we're at it, what are the 4 points? I mean, I guess briefly you can just, share what the 4 points
were. So just really quick, the number one was just the physics around the fact that all electric is a more efficient means of transportation, right? Electricity, physics, right? And that Tesla was the only car company designing an all-electric car from the ground up. And even to this day, you see the other automakers trying to retrofit gasoline cars for an electric use. And that's not really, to really take the full advantage of an electric, you need to start all electric from the ground up. So there was vehicle design. Can Tesla design a superior product? And if you can design a superior product, you're going to sell it. Sure. Point number 2 was Tesla's battery technology, which it's amazing how the research over the years that I've done on this point, I've spent a lot of time, their battery technology is 5 to 10 years ahead of the competition. And you have to watch the competition to make sure that they are maintaining that lead. But with the Gigafactory, which Elon talked about in response to one of my questions on the call, which is really an interesting reveal, with the Gigafactory and being vertically integrated, there's so much I could share with you on what they're doing down to the cellular level to take costs out of the cell. But I did that. I actually had like a table of the cathode costs, the anode costs, the electrolyte, the separator, the packaging, excess materials, the aluminum in it, and how can you eliminate those materials to get those costs down, right? So that would be point 2. It's all about the battery technology. And is it superior? Is it 5 to 10 years ahead of the competition? What's happening with that lead? Point number 3 was all about their manufacturing process, including the fact that they got their factory for pennies on the dollar. This is the other thing about Tesla. Tesla started its company during a period of quantitative easing when capital was flowing freely, right? Like it was a great time to start a company and do something that had never been done before, right? Interest rates were really low. It was easy to get access to capital. People weren't keeping money in the bank. It doesn't gain anything there. You might as well invest it, right? So So all of that, and then also Tesla acquired its factory from Toyota during a period, and he acquired a lot of their like the stamping machines and everything during a period when the auto industry was selling off excess capacity. So they got a lot of equipment for pennies on the dollar. Like it would take somebody else a lot more money to start up an electric car company today. So even Tesla was blessed by its place in history and in time. But also just all around manufacturing. And then I started talking to some of the manufacturing experts about just different concepts like kitting and like, so all of that, and there are robots and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so there's a lot around point number 3, which is all around the manufacturing. And then point number 4 was all about sales, right? That was like, this is where it all comes together. You get your superior technology, your superior product, you make it in a way that really works, but then you have to sell it to the public. And that's where the store strategy really comes in. Okay, they said, we're not gonna use dealers, right? We're going to capture 15 points of margin by selling direct instead of wholesale. We are going to take the conversation around price out. Our prices are on our website. There's no haggling, you know, so all about sales. So everything else is, can they build it? And the point number 4 is, will people come? And that was all about studying their store strategy and studying also their ability to compete with fewer stores, because they're outnumbered like 10 to 1 by BMW and Mercedes in terms of store count. Compete with a lower, distribution interface. So those are the 4 points. And as long as like none of those got really wobbled off, I was able to maintain my conviction.
Got it. Interesting. So I'm curious. Okay, so 2013 passes, and 2014 we see Tesla announced Tesla Energy, or I guess not Tesla Energy yet, Gigafactory. I guess. Also, kind of their intentions to do stationary storage. So, how do you view, like, what's your take on stationary storage? I mean, is it as big of a market as some people see it? What do you see some of the challenges that Tesla faces with stationary storage? What's your take on that?
So back in 2011, I would have conversations with Wall Street investors, and the ones that I really trusted, the ones who knew me, they knew my research, I would say this, and I would always preface it with, I realize I sound crazy, but here's the thing. If you study physics, if you study humanity, if you're like deeply philosophical about life and evolution, the only way we are going to evolve as a species is if we are able to harness the power of the sun. No, I wouldn't say this to just any client because I was young, I'm a woman, I want to be taken seriously, but like that's the big story. That's the big picture. And so for Tesla to evolve into Tesla Energy, they've already solved this problem of energy storage, right? Like the reason why, and I didn't blow dry my hair, it was wet, but like if I were to blow dry my hair, the reason why I'm not using a gas tank, right, is because electricity is more efficient. Right? But I have to plug it into the wall. And there has never been a battery pack that worked really well in a high-powered application that was also cost-effective, where the value proposition was really realized. Tesla's figured that out. Has anybody else figured that out? Tell me if you find them. I hunted. I went to solar conferences. I have been hunting for the person who has the solution that Tesla has that's going to just ruin Tesla, and I could not find one. So Tesla solved this problem of energy storage. And so there's many other uses, right? The automotive use, transportation is one, but as you know, I mean, and so when I studied Tesla Energy, my conclusion, and I wrote a research report called Tesla Energy Deep Dive for Non-Physicists, where I actually went into like, how much energy does your refrigerator use? I mean, I really went, what's the difference between power and energy? We really went deep into it. But we basically concluded that the commercial and utility market is like 10 times the size of the residential market. And that's where there's a big market for using energy storage to offset your peaker plant, for example. Because think of what a problem it is that we cannot store electricity. That means that the capacity in California has to match a super hot day when all of the air conditioners are running in the middle of the day, and so you have to be able to satisfy the peak. This is not true of like any other commodity. Think of corn. right? Like we don't have to match our production with consumption. Why? Because they're grain silos, right? So Tesla's like bringing grain silos to the energy market, right?
Got it.
I mean, if you just think about what a problem it's been that we can't store, it solves a huge human challenge. So I don't know why there wouldn't be a huge market. In my studying, I actually got away from the residential market. We love to talk about it because reporters and Wall Street, it's easy to think about your own home, but the real uses are at the utility level and at the commercial level.
Got it. So, what's your take on the Solar City acquisition? Are you for it? If so, like, what is it going to bring to Tesla? Are there challenges in, integrating, you think, Solar City into the company? What's your take?
So when I first heard of it, I was like, oh, why now? And then I said, okay, am I smarter than Elon Musk? No. What am I missing? I wrote to Elon, he wrote back in his classic, very short emails. And I said, okay, if I look at your company, and this is where most of Wall Street is, as a car company, this makes no sense. If I look at your company as you are migrating humanity off of our reliance on fossil fuels, it makes perfect sense. And he wrote back, yup, or something like that. And here's how I came around. Let me tell you how I came around on it. So I'm so glad I didn't have to write a research. This was so hard about being an analyst. You had to write a research note that night, and tell the world what you think of this opinion. And you're like, well, but here's how I kind of came around. So when I first heard it, I thought, why now? And then the second thought, I thought, oh my gosh, of course. They need to own this ahead of opening the Gigafactory. Not only that, I applied for a Tesla Energy pack for my house.
Sure.
I wanted to do that. And Solar City reached out to me, and then a mom and pop reached out to me, and it was just generally a mess. Like it was a mess. And what I realized is like Tesla needs to own the go-to-market because it needs to be one stop. Because if you're selling like your Tesla Energy packs to Solar City or to mom and pops, what's going to happen is that you don't control the point of sale of your pack. And they want to control the point of sale on the car. Of course, they want to control the point of sale on the pack. It makes sense. If you go into a Tesla store and you wanted to buy a Tesla Energy pack, not the car, then who do you call for your installer? Then Tesla needs to be integrated with the installer. So could it have just been a partnership? Solar City is the #1 solar installer in North America. #2, I believe, is Vivint. So, it makes sense. So now Tesla becomes the #1 solar installer. Solar's not. The only thing that got me is like, what's the IP? I mean, basically they're buying the distribution channel, right? Because it's not like Solar City. Solar City finances the installations of the solar panels, but it's not like they procure those solar. It's not like they're making the solar panels, right? They procure them. So I'm bloviating here, and I don't want to do that. So stop me.
Worries. Yeah. Okay.
I don't want to bore people. Is anybody still watching?
Yeah, there's plenty of people.
Okay.
Actually, most people are going to watch it the recorded version anyway. So.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Okay. Interesting. I wanted to touch on kind of your life as an analyst, because I think a lot of retail investors we don't know what's behind the scenes, what goes on. So, like, can you share a bit, kind of like, how many companies like would you be covering at once? And then what were your responsibilities toward, let's say, Tesla? And would it be kind of focused more on earnings and kind of putting out your research notes and stuff? Or what can you share that a lot of us might not know about?
So I work for a small firm, right? And I competed with the large firms. And I think I competed quite well. Pretty much everyone who owned Tesla stock and, the top X number of shareholders were taking my research, talking to me on the phone. So I think I competed well. At any given point in time, your typical analyst is going to cover 8 to 12 stocks. There are people who cover up to 20 stocks. I don't think they do it that well. I always prided myself on going really deep, like probably deeper than most analysts. So I always had fewer stocks. As a matter of fact, I always did really well when I had like 8 to 10. I really didn't like adding new stocks because even though there was always so much pressure from the firm to do so, but because you make more money researching more stocks. But my compensation was 100% commission, which means I didn't make money unless my clients were happy with my research, and if they made money. Which is very funny because I know in a lot of times, like in anonymous message boards, they would say, oh, I'm like in bed with the company, or it's like, no, because my bread and butter, my paycheck came from Wall Street, right? So if they didn't make money, I didn't make money. So that was my client, I served them, I didn't serve Tesla. It just so happened that I believed in Tesla, what Tesla was doing, and I became sort of fangirl-ish, but was also very quick to point out when they were falling behind, to warn investors about that sort of thing. So the lifestyle is very, I mean, you have to live it. It's a lifestyle. It's not a job. You really do live it. You're flying a lot. You're going to a lot of conferences. I really believe in boots on the ground research. For example, are you familiar with the term channel check?
Yeah.
So you
maybe
check
you can
the channel.
explain that to your.
Yeah, so I would channel check. So channel check is channel checks are like calling the channel. So you would call Tesla stores, or if it was another company, you'd call their third-party dealers, or talking to their suppliers, or just making sure you have a network. Like for me, making sure I had a network of contacts of the Tesla ecosystem who were feeding information into me at any given point. So I had contacts who worked on the factory floor, who work for third-party suppliers, for instance. So I kind of had a view, into the factory that I didn't have to rely on the company. I would channel check the bar across the street from Tesla, from the factory. So I remember one time the bartender, and I would call and I would say, well, what are the employees talking about? And then at one point there was a quarter where I think the bartender was like, oh, there's a lot of overtime this quarter. Because this is the other thing, because of regulation, fair disclosure, Reg FD, you're not allowed to get information, like because of insider trading laws, you have to find out what's going on in a way that's legal, but the company can't tell you, right? Like that's not allowed. So you end up having to create like a mosaic, they call it mosaic theory, a mosaic of what's actually going on at any given point. And then what happens on the conference calls is you get confirmed, right, of whether or not the mosaic picture you painted that quarter was correct. So being an analyst is constantly battling the near term, right? Because my clients were paid to have anxiety and to think constantly about risk. What's going to blow me up this week, right? What's going to happen this week that's going to send the stock down and I'm going to, lose money. So you're constantly monitoring the near term. But then also kind of providing some breadth and depth and perspective on the long term. Right.
It.
And so, yeah.
So for your clients, like, were they like hedge fund managers, or were they like pretty much, were they more short-term focused, and were they very like anxious during the quarterly earnings call mostly, or were they, or did you have some, that were more just like longer term, Yeah.
So the thing about Wall Street is like, or for somebody like an analyst like me, my research didn't get sold to anybody managing under 100 million in assets. So generally it was people mostly not managing their own money, although there were some clients I had that managed their own money, but people who had hundreds of millions to invest and manage. But it was the hedge fund community. And hedge funds can be long or short. And so like you can have a long only hedge fund, which can only invest to the long side, right? They can't short stocks. I also talked to the shorts. So I made a pact with myself early on as an analyst. It was like integrity is the name of the game. I say the same thing to somebody short as I would to somebody long. And I approach everybody with an open mind. So when shorts would call me, they really sharpened my research. I remember there was a short I was on the phone with in like 2011. And this person was going through everything Tesla was going to be wrong. I mean, I remember having a shower, like I was in the shower and I had a glass shower door and doing calculations in the steam on the door because the short had I was like, oh my gosh, I forget what it was. It might've been the warranty reserve. I can't remember what it was, but I was like, oh my God. And like, I'm just doing it. I'm like, it was 2,000 per car and times X number of cars. Okay. And the balance sheet has this, like, I remember so the shorts really sharpened me. And so I would have, over the course of a week, easily, I would say if I did 30 conversations on Tesla alone. Tesla could have been a full-time job for me. But I had other stocks that I cared about and had a name on. But And so I would talk to all kinds of investors, in other words. So I had investors who were just in it for a trade. I had investors who were short it, and I would tell them like, well, here's the risk to your short. And then we had people who were sort of long only. They had more of like a 5-year view. And those were like, they didn't need as much hand-holding the day after earnings. For example, the day after earnings, your short-term investors are all making their decisions, right? Or they're making decisions right up until the market closes with earnings. I remember having this is a typical conversation, right? I'm on the phone. I think Tesla's going to say this afternoon. Well, what if they say this? Okay. Yeah, okay, but here's what I know, and here's what the stores, and here's where I think the reservation count is in China, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And then you'd have this whole thing. And then at one point I go, we're going to know in about 90 minutes. They're trying to make, the market's about to close, and they're trying to make a decision. And then I had other ones that the day after earnings, like they'd be like, oh yeah, I was watching TV. I didn't listen to the call, but I'm going to read the transcript. And Andrea, I'll give you a call in a week to decide if we want to trim our position. So the gamut.
Got it. So was somehow like the amount of Tesla that they owned linked to the commission that you would get, I guess? Like
no, yeah. So this is generally how it works on this. I was a sell side analyst on the sell side as opposed to the buy side, which the people actually buy the stock. So sell side analyst, the sell side shop is going to have 3 primary positions. And the research, right? So there's investment banking, but like then there's a Chinese wall between investment banking. And so our firm was never on a Tesla deal. So my research was completely, but there's a Chinese wall anyway. But like our firm never got paid by Tesla, right? But if we did, we would have to disclose that. But we were never on the Tesla deals. Because we were smaller as a firm. And so in a way, it made me even more independent than say like Goldman Sachs has an analyst as well as their firms on the deal. Now there's supposed to be a Chinese wall between investment banking and research. Your research opinion is not supposed to be tied to investment banking. But generally as a firm, we were just completely clear of all of that. But so then there's in the research function, there's 3 roles, right? There's the analyst who writes and sells the research. There's institutional sales, right? So this is the guys who talk and sell the research and distribute it and make sure they would manage my schedule and get me on the phone with the clients. And then there was trading. Trading traded, millions of dollars worth of stock all day long. And if somebody bought Tesla stock, they had a choice of paying me 2 cents, 3 cents, 4 cents, or 5 cents a share. And they could pick. I was working for tips. But if somebody, many of the larger firms, and I don't want to kind of get into who my clients were, but the big ones, and their names, they won't necessarily trade through our trading desk. So how do they pay me for my research? Well, they would just send a check. So they, once a quarter, I'd get a check for $40,000 from a large fund that was paying me for my research, and I'd make a commission on that.
Got it. That makes sense.
That's how it works. And that's how it works most places.
Got it. Do you have any temptations to like continue like on your own a bit? Do you because you have 6-7 years of built up just knowledge on Tesla and the industry, or are you kind of already moved past that?
I'll always love. It's interesting. I'm coaching. I'm doing executive coaching right now. It's really great helping executives reach their potential. Coaching several people through career transition, high performance professionals making career transition. And that really is very gratifying. I love technology, and so if there's a way for me to incorporate that love and passion and knowledge that I have, sure. I've thought about starting a newsletter. I'm highly perfectionist though, so I would really have to believe that I could do the job but I'm open to it. We should talk offline because
we should talk. This is kind of interesting. Would you ever read Tesla Motors Club, kind of the investor section or even owners posts and stuff? What would that help you with?
Oh my gosh. I don't know how you couldn't read it really. It was one of my go-tos as well as, Elon's Twitter feed. It's like twitter.com/Elon Musk TMC. So I would look for specific things. A lot of times issues cropped up on the forums before they reached the press. I was surprised by how many of my co-analysts weren't reading the forums. I mean, like I said, Tesla ecosystem, you guys are an important part of the ecosystem. The Tesla fan club was always really important to me because I said this early on, like the Tesla fire, for example, and then that Twitter hashtag started up, remember, not a Tesla, and they'd show pictures of vehicle fires. Like Tesla's marketing is largely done through word of mouth, and it's like its own evangelical fan club. I read the investor boards. You guys are funny. I know some people thought I said looked airheady on TV. Whatever. I mean, you know, I just I read most of it. Most of it. I mean, I couldn't. There's a lot that's posted, but yeah, we were always checking it.
Yeah.
And we did an analysis one time of I had a junior analyst, and so he combed the forums to look for the average, like what people owned before, like the car they owned before their Tesla, and kind of that was a really helpful. That would be an example of a thread that was actually we used for research because we were like, people are really reaching up to buy the Tesla, and therefore, we say the Model S is a 2 million unit market. Well, actually, it's bigger if reach vehicle, right? If people who are generally not in that price point are reaching up to that price point, all of a sudden the total addressable market is even bigger than we thought. So we would point to that, for example, as an example.
Got it. Cool. I'm wrapping up some of my final questions here. So what's your kind of like thoughts on this, the master plan part 2? Did any part of it kind of stick out as like, wow, that's actually really exciting? Or did anything stick out as like concerning, or kind of what was your impressions?
Well, let me ask you, was any of it super surprising to you?
Well,
you've been paying attention. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the energy part was only like one sentence, and somehow they left out the utility scale. I'm thinking that was just a mistake on Elon's part, but oversight. I mean, the car parts are the car section is pretty straightforward. You had the Tesla Semi and then the minibus. The Semi, actually, I personally was actually like forecasting that. Like I had done research on the trucking industry myself over the past several months, and I had been talking to people, and I started to say this is going to be the next big market for Tesla. I think it's going to take a long time for them to get into, but with autonomous driving and electric powertrains for trucks, I think that's going to be huge. The minibus was kind of interesting. It was unclear until Elon later clarified that it was going to be on the Model X platform. And then you had the autonomous kind of ride sharing parts. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was for me, my impression was Tesla is becoming more and more like a conglomerate, kind of like one of these, like, in Korea or Japan, you have these huge conglomerates that have like separate industries, right? And they're actually, a lot of them are headed by either a really visionary CEO or family, right? And I felt like with Tesla, like cars were their first big, company, and it seems like Tesla Energy has potential to become this huge second big company. And I felt like logistics where Tesla could ship goods from point A to B, if they use that with their trucks, etc., that could be another huge industry. But I'm just curious, like, were you after the master plan part 2, were you more bullish, you think, on Tesla, or less, or just the same, or was it just matter of fact, like, oh, this is what I expected? Kind of, what were your initial thoughts?
I wondered about the timing of it. I think the team is seeing that they need to put some more thoughts around what they're doing. For example, the Solar City acquisition caught everybody by surprise. And so as they start to make more moves, I think that they need to put some parameters around what they're thinking for their long-term vision. That was basically my take on it. So given the level of technology advancement that they have, and given what Gigafactory gives them in multiple Gigafactories, all of a sudden worlds open up, right? And so I always struggle with investors to kind of put parameters around, okay, I would say this is a company with options. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, I don't know. They could start Tesla Water and desalination. I mean, there's so much that they can figure out. And so for me, it was good to get some clarity around, okay, over the next 5 to 10 years, to the extent that they are going to invest capital, they need to tell us what their thinking is, so that way it doesn't look from this side of it, not having the view of the secret master plan, like they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. At the same time, Elon wrote it, didn't he? He like wrote it overnight, right? So I think that like it's open to being edited. You know what I mean? Like I think that they're in a process of discovery, and it will get refined over time. Because I mean, getting into like the just smart, I mean, that is a totally different, right? Like, so there's a company with options. They have the technology can insert into multiple different industries. So I thought it would be helpful. The document on its own is okay. It's great, but its real value is going to come as Tesla maneuvers. So you can start to see it as part of a bigger picture rather than something sporadic and that looks like they don't know what they're doing, if that makes sense.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Do you have a Model 3 reservation? A chance?
I still have a Model X reservation.
Oh, really? Okay.
I haven't gotten, but yeah. I mean, we can convert it or whatever, or get the Model X and then get early in the line.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. Just wanted to share my thanks and gratitude. Lots of people on Tesla Motors Club, they've been looking forward to this, and I'm sure most people will view it, the recorded version.
I hope it was helpful. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful. I think one of the main reasons why I wanted to interview you was because I kind of look at a lot of for Tesla, it's such it's a polarizing stock, but there's also not just institutional investors, but there's also retail investors that get excited about Tesla. It's one of these companies that you can actually understand as a retail investor. It's like cars, and you can own the car and drive the car. And so a lot of people, they buy the car, they love it, they might buy stock. But it's like the world of the institutional investor and analysts and quarterly calls, it's kind of mysterious for a lot of people. And I think it's helpful to have you and kind of share kind of like what it's like to cover Tesla, how you researched it yourself, just how you see the potential and risks going forward as well. But super helpful to kind of bridge the gap between retail investors and the institutional world.
Can I share something else that helps bridge that gap that I didn't bring up before? Sure. So I created this Tesla model from scratch, and it's like 100 tabs. And I've got their SG&A modeled out to their store count. And I've got their gross margins at one point, not so much anymore, but I was modeling their gross margins down to what's the cost of the chassis, right? Like, what are their labor hours per vehicle? And so a lot of Wall Street, and you'll hear this on the calls, there's a lot of numbers questions on the calls. Those questions are designed to inform a model in which you change a cell and it might change the valuation of the stock way down the road, right? So I've got I had a very complicated, I'm looking at it right now. This is why I'm looking off to the side. I have two screens. Sure. And I have this really complicated Tesla model. And I've got a cost per kilowatt hour tab and ASP options where if you add the leather interior, and you would come up with, you would just analyze every piece of information about the company, but you'd also analyze what their competitors are doing, right? So like I would compare the cost of Tesla's options to BMW's options. And is Tesla price too high? And do they need to come down? And what do they need to do with their currency? And so the number of questions that you are constantly asking, they've got to be in the millions. I mean, I'm looking at this, I have a battery worksheet where I go through the wiring, the structure around the pack, the cooling components. So my model was where I kind of stored all my information. And so I would share this model with Wall Street investors, and we were deep into the numbers. And that's where I think retail investors don't go as deep. They're not making a model. They don't get the numbers that come out and just parse them. I mean, you're reading and so that's a big difference, I would say, between.
So I mean, like actually, like some of us have actually tried to, like go deep down. Like I was actually every quarter I would plug in all of Tesla's financial numbers into my own, spreadsheets and come up with my own thing. But I think one of the difficult parts is like with questions and stuff, it's it's like it's difficult to get more color and more specifics on kind of like what Tesla gives, during their quarterly earnings. So how would you overcome that? Would you like ask around to your other analyst friends, or would you ask, the company, or would for example, what goes into the pack costs, for example, the casing and everything else? Like, how would you come up with, your own type of figures?
Yeah, so I feel like if you're asking about something like that on the quarterly conference call, you're not really doing your homework. So like the quarterly, so this, like, here's how I looked at the quarterly conference call. This is your chance to talk to Elon Musk and ask him questions. And there's always a private follow-up. I don't know if you know that, but after the public call, Jeff and Jason Wheeler, or previously Deepak, would call us. So you would get your private callback. So I would save some of that nitpicky, unless it was really big. Like I remember the one time when they put out their guidance and the CapEx was way bigger than we had thought. I did ask a numbers question because you had to. You're like, oh my God, your CapEx is way bigger. So what's your cash position going to be at the end of the year? You had to go to the numbers. But for the most part, I didn't get hung up on that because Tesla's so accessible that you can ask some of that privately and save kind of for the call. I was always a little bit more, I would ask more strategic. I would get more strategic rather than financial.
Yeah. So the callbacks would then I guess CFO or investor relations persons call each of the analysts back separately, or as a group?
You'd set up your slot. Yeah. So the day before the call, you would you would send, the IR person, and this is true of every company I covered, by the way. I only had one company that didn't do callbacks, but and you'd say, what time do you want for a callback? And we're doing callbacks. And so when they hang up the call, Elon didn't do it. But the CFO and Jeff would do it, and they would work well into the night calling.
Wow! So it would be like a 5, 10, or 15-minute call. Would it be as many questions as you could ask, basically, or what?
15. 15. We got 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Interesting.
Because
So I mean, would you guys share information with other analysts too, or would you just pretty much ask all the questions you could?
No, it's very competitive. Minutes? It's very competitive. Yeah.
So here's my gripe with this, and it's like I've had this gripe for quite a few years. As a retailer, I feel like I'm at a disadvantage sometimes because it's like I hear, I get the shareholder letter, I get the conference call, but I can't really ask any more questions on any of this stuff, and it's like we don't get callbacks, as retail investors, right? And so it's like I can't get the color that I'm wanting on a lot of these figures and numbers, So I'm left with my own spreadsheets, and all I can do is base it off of what Tesla has shared on their conference call or their earnings reports. And I'm kind of stuck. And on the forums also, a lot of people were just stuck. And so we just ask the question to each other, and everyone else just speculates for the next few days, like, oh, it must cost this much, or it must be this, X, Y, and Z. But because we don't have the opportunity to call back. But here's the thing, it's not that retail investors per se own a small amount of stock. For example, like I could get together. Yeah, I could get together just on our TMC Investors Club. I can get together probably a good 30 or 40 people, and we'll have more than $100 million worth of Tesla stock. If we have more, I could probably get actually quite a bit more than that, just represented just with a group of people. But it's like, but we don't have any access. That's the thing. And then these analysts, they represent clients and funds that it's hard to get access to. So it's like they're sharing this. It's kind of like information should be democratized, especially for anyone who owns a stock. But it feels like at times the information is kind of like, kind of privileged at times, and it's given to privileged funds who have hundreds of millions of dollars to wait to go with. And I don't know. That's been my gripe, and I hope Tesla can somehow address this. But
I would say so. This is true. So your gripe. I hear you. I mean, I wouldn't argue with anything you said. It's true of investing. Period. Right. I mean, the largest funds, management, for example, when management tours a city, they're going to meet with the large holders, right? Like they're not going to go meet with retailers. I would say in terms of Tesla does probably a better job than any other, and I'm not like blowing smoke, better job than any company I covered with just giving information to everybody, like in terms of that shareholder letter. Brilliant.
Sure.
You can, so here's the thing. I've had companies who wouldn't talk to me because they didn't like me, because I had a negative opinion. I was too small, my firm was too small. Here's what I found. If you are really dedicated, you can do great research. The problem is like I was paid to do research full time. I had nothing better to do with my day than research the companies I did, right? That was my job. Whereas as a retail investor, you have a day job, presumably. But I would say that like, in terms of doing research, like you don't need to have that level of corporate access to do great research. As a matter of fact, corporate access can sometimes be a liability. And I'm not trying to negate what you said. I actually, I get it. But I am saying that sometimes like the real answer, I'll give you an example. There was a company, and I just don't want to get into what the company was because it's beyond the scope of this chat. There was a company that said, we're going to move into this market and we're going to sell to this particular type of seller. And I'll tell you the company, whatever. It was Stratasys. They made 3D printers. And this was years ago. And they said, we're going to sell to architects. We're going to sell these 3D printers to architects, and the architects are going to build these 3D models. And that's going to be a growth market for us. Okay. But as an analyst, that's not my job to go and put that in a research note that, architecture is their growth market. I called some architects, and everyone I talked to, I was like, if you had a spare, like, $10,000, $12,000, would you buy a 3D printer, to make the little models of homes or whatever, or the buildings? And they were like, no, we wouldn't. We'd buy a new 2D plotter, like the big, beautiful two-dimensional plotters. And I'm like, well, what about, you have to build all those, like, those buildings, and like, you could have a 3D printer do it. And they're like, well, actually in the architecture market, you have to be like an apprentice or like a low paid apprentice before you can become an architect. And so all these kids are coming out of the schools and it's like cheaper labor. And so they basically have like the intern gluing all the little trees, and there was no printer that could make the windows, like the clear glass in the windows. And anyway, the point was, and I'm not trying to pick on Stratasys. I had to buy on them for a long time. The point is that companies will give you information, or they will tell you their plan. The real research is not your private callback with the CFO. That's really just making sure that you don't look stupid in your research note the next day because you have a dumb question you didn't want to ask on the public call, right? Like, when you said this, what did you mean? And am I right? If I put these two numbers together and publish that, am I going to look dumb, right? That's that, right? But as a private, since you're not publishing anything publicly, the real research comes when you take everything they said and you check it out.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that myself and others would compensate for our lack of direct access. By the way, actually, Jeff was very helpful sometimes. But one of the ways we would compensate would be we would be super fanatical in every little type of like talk that Tesla gives. If Elon speaks at a store opening in like Paris, and it's like a bootleg,
you guys are amazing.
Like 30 minutes of Elon's talk, like we would analyze like every sentence of that, and I feel like,
great.
And then also like on the ground issues, like, oh, here's the next software update. Here's, what the stores are saying, or here's what, a service center says, So I think we will compensate by doing that. And overall, I think that's a much stronger, research position to be kind of like in touch with all that.
You've crowdsourced your research in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. But I wish we had both though.
Well, I would say too, the other thing is like for example, when I had my costs of the cathode and the anode down to the whatever, I didn't get that from the company. They would not give me that stuff. I got that from competitors. So, and that's the other thing. Look for peers who are publicly traded and get their investor presentations off their websites, because you can find a lot around the peers.
Got it. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Andrea, I'm gonna let you go. I wanted to give you a couple minutes, wherever, to plug what you're doing. If you have I know you're doing career coaching, executive coaching. Who are you looking for as clients? How can they, reach out to you if they're interested in, your services. Go ahead.
Oh, you're so nice. Thank you. So, I should have prepared an elevator pitch, whatever. So I started my own company called SolveForX Coaching, where I work with individuals to help them in their decision-making process. And there's 3 types of coaching that I'm doing. One is transformation coaching, which is, you could be, and my typical age range that I'm working with is young 30s all the way up to 60s. And it's, here's where I am in life. I really get to know you. And we start to think about what kind of changes you'd like to make or where you'd like to be. And there's a lot of different steps of the decision-making process. You might be pre-contemplation, you might be contemplating a move, you might be just wanting to see if you're optimizing things. You might be completely unhappy, and I have people at different stages. The other one is executive performance coaching, and this is executive level professionals who need to grow. They're either being groomed for a higher level position, or they have very specific things that they want to work on. I need to get better at operations, for example, or stuff like that. And I have a couple in that. And then I have my meeting planning and facilitation, which I just did my first. It was great. I went out. I spent a week with a company. They were doing their long-term strategic plan, and I was the facilitator. And so my job was to come in, I nurture the discussion, but also ask a lot of hard questions. Have you thought about this? If you're going to do this, have you thought about that? If you're going to make an acquisition, let's come at it from all the angles that an analyst would. How's Wall Street going to think about this? So those are the 3 areas, and I really love it. And I keep my client load low. It's really personal. And so I have room for about 3 more clients, and that's about it, because I do keep the client load pretty low.
Cool. And do you have a website?
Oh yeah. You could go to solveforxcoaching.com, but it's really long. You could do andreajames.net.
Okay.
And don't do andreajames.com. She's a transsexual, and she shares a name with me, and she has andreajames.com. I've known her for years. Mm-hmm. And she got the .com in like 1998, and I bought andreajames.net in 1999. So andreajames.net.
Got it. Yeah, sounds good. Have you subscribed to my newsletter? It's called TeslaWeekly.com.
No, is it? Can I do that?
Yeah,
you gotta get me. Yes, I would love to.
It's actually a free email newsletter. I actually go through like hundreds of sites and news sources on Tesla, and I pick out what I think is kind of the most fair and balanced, objective, kind of like best articles. And I might add a few comments and stuff, because I feel like the world of Tesla news, it's like very biased and confusing at times, for people.
And I love that you're doing this. So let me tell you. So when I first started researching Tesla in like 2011, 12, mm-hmm. I wrote everything they did. I wrote about. I had a Google alert on Elon's name. By the time we got to the end of 13, I slowed down my publication, and here's why. I felt like the value in covering Tesla is stripping out the noise. There is so much noise. There's so much bad information. Whether it's malicious or not, it's mentioned as erroneous. Don't trust everything you read. And so what I would do is I would only publish when I really had something to say. And so I felt like, even though I had my finger on the pulse of everything, and I would love to read your newsletter, but I would be like, here's what matters. Here's what you need to know as an investor. The rest is just noise. And that was my service to the clients, was they didn't have to think about it too much. I would say, okay, I'll tell you when there's something I feel like is important.
Yeah. It's like sometimes if there's a news event for Tesla, it's like there might be 30 articles, and like 29 out of 30 just slanted like in a weird, like biased way where you could tell the reporter isn't knowledgeable, And mm-hmm. It's like maybe one article might have it right. So that's my service. I take that one article, I link to it, and I say, hey, this is
that's great. Article. You add so much value. And also know that in some educated circles, it has become the thing to say, oh, I heard Tesla's a short. Yeah. Oh, I heard that company's not going away. And it's interesting because it's really educated, smart people. And in their sort of cultural circle, that's is something you're supposed to say. Like it's like name dropping almost. Exactly. It's really an interesting. When I first started, one more thing, there's so many things. When I went to New York and I would talk to the clients in New York, 9 out of 10 was short. And then I'd go to
Wow.
California and I'd market, and 9 out of 10 were long.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, and one of the things I told my investor clients was, especially my New Yorkers, I'm like, you guys are culturally different than Californians. Like, in New York, nobody wants to be a sucker. Like, you don't want to be the person who like tried the new technology, because then you might look like a sucker or a failure. It's very like, you want to buy the established brand. In California, it's much more experimental. Like, oh, I'm going to buy this car. So what if the company goes out of business? Like, I believe in failing fast. It's that Silicon Valley tech culture. And then the other thing is, New Yorkers, I think in general, they're not really drivers like Manhattanites, right? Like, I remember Garmin, like there was a lot of people who were short Garmin way back in the day, back when Garmin was up. They were like, why would anybody want turn-by-turn directions? We know where everything is, you know? And it was like, yeah, on Manhattan Island. So it's just, you always take into account who's saying it and where they come from and their own context for having the reason to say that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, thank you, Andrea. I already get like the feeling that Tesla, the experience of being an analyst for Tesla has like has helped you, and has kind of, you've gained a lot from it, just in terms of experience and view of the world. And thanks for sharing that with people. Yeah, it's been a super helpful talk. So hopefully we can do it again. And yeah, good luck to your future endeavors.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.